Chapter 38. The next runic symbol was the most complex I'd seen yet. 3 arches like triangles with no bottom lines, each sharing one wall to form 4 angled legs. Their tips merged into the shape of a 6-pointed star. You have learned a new rune, Fae, an ice-powered base rune used to lend magic weapons and shields frost damage. Unlike more basic runes, Fae allows casters to draw its shape in the air to form ice shields. You have discovered a new spell, Fae Shield, level 8. Use both hands to draw the symbol Fae in the air before you to form an ice shield that absorbs damage equal to 35% of your total health. Applies to magic and physical damage. Type, spell. Cost, 45 mana. Cooldown, 30 seconds. Requires Shadow Magic rank 10. Current Shadow Magic rank 14. Your runecrafting skill has reached rank 14. I popped open my supplemental log, then copied the image and its description there. Unlike when I tried to save the whole tome, this effort worked, which told me if I manually copied the pages to my notes, I could record the full contents. If only I'd known that sooner. Party, Dross and Welling.
Why do you linger? They gather at the main entrance.
I twisted and started sifting through the leather scroll cylinders, but when I reached to grasp one, a bright symbol flashed in the aged animal skin, then faded until it was almost invisible. You have learned a new skill, Detect Runes. Often hidden in items and doors, the ability to recognize runes can aid you in learning them and using their opposite elements to reverse their effects. Type, skill, requirements, runecrafting rank 14. Shadow or light magic affinity 80%. Chance of success using detect runes is dependent upon runecrafting rank and the rank required to read the rune. Your runecrafting skill has reached rank 15. The information blurred. I focused on the rune burned into the leather a second time. Maybe burned was the wrong word, but my mind didn't have time for semantic debates. Fae. It was pure luck I'd just learned that rune. After popping off the lid, I shook out the scroll, hoping my suspicions would be justified when I unrolled it. If the symbol on the outside of the tube reflected the Worsager's organization system, then the scroll inside would be readable by anyone who knew the Fae rune. I was proven correct. None of the actual symbols scrawled on the parchment were Fae, but when I read them, they reorganized themselves into readable text demanding my attention. Congratulations, you have read Scroll of Wisdom. You have gained 2 points of wisdom, plus 4 mana recovery per tick while in combat, plus 8 mana recovery per tick while out of combat. Your runecrafting skill has reached rank 16. The scroll disintegrated in golden motes that drifted toward the ground but evaporated long before they reached it. I shoved the empty cylinder out of the way, then scrounged for another. A scroll glowed with the rune Ra, which I recalled was a fire-based rune. I slipped it open. Then my chat window popped up again. Party, Dross and Welling.
Perhaps this is why you linger. Tess, whatever you've done to gain these attributes, you will never be able to stand against the power of the Magister and the Templars, even less the Elves. You must return.
Party, Contessa of Milbury. I'm almost done. Party, Dross and Welling.
No, child. You are finished now. Return this instant. I have hidden from them, but when they track me down, they will insist I show them where you are on my map. Do you understand?
The weight of the responsibility he'd taken on my behalf punched me in the brain. I cursed silently to myself, then told Drassen I was on my way. I rolled the scroll containers over in my hand, and only one other revealed a glowing runic symbol. When I'd stuffed that one securely in my belt, I reached toward the cave mouth, reading the Ra-based scroll as I went. You have gained 2 points of strength. For all the good strength would do me, I guessed it was better than nothing. I tossed the scroll away, and it poofed into golden motes. I found Brunk sitting next to Monteleana with his hands gripping his knees. They both stared south, toward Warrington's walls. All clear? I asked upon approach. Brunk grunted, then tapped his chest twice with his fist in a more casual way than earlier. Okay, I have to go. Without thinking, I set my hand on one of Brunk's. Thank you, my friend. I will try to get back to see you soon. He gripped the hand before I could pull away.
Trouble, Tess? Wrong help?
I shook my head. All I needed was to add his imprisonment or death to my list of pains. Not this time. I set off and Monteleana swooped into the air. Scout ahead. Tell me if you see anything, Manty.
Yes, master.
Oh, and if you see any snakes, fry them. We reached the secret door without event, and I stopped as soon as we stepped into the tunnel. You have to go away now. I will see you soon. Monteleana landed on my shoulder. She was so kind as to extinguish her flames before landing.
Focus on the summoning skill again, then I will vanish, master.
She hung her head, her angular nose pointed toward my collarbone. Empathy tugged at my chest, but I didn't have options. The sight of her would cause instant suspicions, and judging from what Drassenwelling had said, there was already plenty of that. The added strength from the scroll I'd read noticeably eased the effort of lifting the grate from below. At least it was something. When I entered the back room of the temple, Roshan stood leaning against the wall, her arms folded across her shimmering white robe.
Something told me you would come from there if you came. I pray to the goddess that you have explanations.
I searched for a word I'd learned from Baba when a piece of sweet fruit disappeared from our daily stash before dinner. You mean an alibi? Roshan nodded, then gestured toward the door. Heart pounding against my breastbone, I stepped through the door and my sandals clicked and clacked on the cobblestones outside. A tall figure with his arms hanging loosely by his side, one clutching his staff. Elrin.
You bitch!
He raised his staff.
You killed him!
He drew the staff back for a strike. I'd have to engage to protect myself, or count on Roshan's healing powers to undo any damage he did. I sighed, then dropped my hands. Then I leaned my chin toward the incoming strike, then growled at Elrin. Do your best. A translucent shell pinged to life and surrounded me. Roshan stepped forward and thrust out her hand. I expected to see it glow as she came to my defense, but she merely splayed her fingers, then shouted,
Elrin Zen, you will step away at once or be expelled.
Motion from the right. White-clad soldiers sprinted toward us. The staff clanked off the shield, then recoiled. His arms shuddered with the transferred energy, and his whitened knuckles showed no sign he'd comply. Then his gaze shifted to Roshan. His shoulders fell. The staff clattered to the cobblestones. One of the elven guards clad in white leather arrived and gripped his arm.
Step away, young man.
Two towering men in white plate with short beards gripped my arms, then dragged me toward the front of the academy without words. Just before the side door to the dormitory passed out of sight, I spied the golden braids of an elven figure leaning against it. The young woman from my class, Trela Shen. She threw the door open, then slipped inside. The Templars practically dragged me through the front entrance. Upon the gleaming floors inside stood Magister Lyra, the instructor of Foundations of Magic, Miswell During, Joran Renard, and Yin. All but Master During sent glares in my direction, and Yin topped the lot with a sneer. But it was Magister Lyra who raised a glowing hand and silenced me.
Take her to the old Magister's office. We'll interrogate her there.
Interrogate me? Lyra stepped close, then thrust a finger into my chest.
I rue the day you stepped on this campus, Contessa of Milbury. I had my doubts when you first sat across from me and hid your shadow affinity, like the ignorant room farm girl you are. But I sensed your potential, and I hoped you would prove a boon to our first class in the new academy. Now I see I was mistaken.
An internal debate erupted. I longed to respond, to grind my teeth and growl at this woman who'd been nothing but flagrant in her disapproval of me of late. But Drassenwelling put his own reputation at risk when he bound me, and I was innocent. I wouldn't give her further reason to suspect me. Instead, I raised the hand of one restrained arm and gestured toward the hallway she'd indicated. Then let's get on with it. I've done nothing wrong. Lyra's lips twitched, then she stepped back.
Take her.
Chapter 39. Sturdy shelves of dust-covered wood stood barren in the sprawling space. Lines of warm light traced the outside of heavy maroon curtains reaching all the way to the wooden floor. A matching rug with intricate gold spread in the center of the cell. The only furnishings were the 3 high-backed chairs with cushy seats facing one less inviting wooden one. I was dragged and dropped into the latter. Magister Lyra, Master During, and Master Renard settled into the seats in front of me. Drassen Welling entered last. He leaned against one of the shelves and folded his arms across his chest. A sheen of sweat covered his head. Magister Lyra shot Drassen a suspicious glance. I wondered if he'd been invited to the proceedings. After a short pause, she waved the guards out of the room. "We can handle this one." She shot my bound companion a look. "Can't we, Master Welling?" Steady as a statue, he gave no indication he'd heard her. Still, the Magister cocked her head to the door, dismissing the guards. One Templar gave me a second glance before giving Lyra a half-nod. He followed his partner into the hallway and slammed the heavy door behind him. The interim leader of the academy crossed her legs first, then set one hand atop the other on her knee. "Where were you an hour ago?" Let the interrogation begin. I could have lied, said I was with Luli, and my employer might have covered for me, but I couldn't be certain, and I wouldn't put her in that position. Shabana either, especially since I didn't know where she'd been an hour past, but I wasn't about to point my finger in Bronk's direction. I was elsewhere, not on the academy grounds.
Not a very satisfying answer,
Master During said. Although his tone wasn't unfriendly, it wasn't pleasant either. I recalled he'd used the same tone with Johan when he'd stepped out of line in Fundamentals of Magic the first day. Was he really dead? I didn't respond. Magister Lyra's mouth tensed. "This is not a game, Tess. One of our students is dead." "How is he dead?" "We will ask the questions. Where were you an hour ago?" Master Renard leaned forward and set his elbows upon his knee.
Do not lie, Tess. I have an ability that will allow me to know if you're being untruthful. It has a very high success rate.
"The girl needs no coaching from you." The Magister snapped her fingers. "Answer." Drassen Welling gave the slightest nod when I glanced his way. "Outside the town trying to increase my skills." "Party, Drassen Welling. Party chat. Drassen Welling, party."
Good. Share your combat log.
I tried my best to give no indication I read his message in my interface. But Lyra was no fool to be trifled with. She twisted her upper body to address Drassen. "Can you account for this?" He bowed his head.
I can. I'm sure Tess would happily share her combat log with you. She fought a snake and a wolf simultaneously.
"But if I show them that, they'll see how I've grown. Would this not play against me?" Party, Drassen Welling.
Swaths of burnt soil and grass in the training field speak to your power.
Party, Contessa of Milbury. My power when charmed and under the influence of a demonic buff. His lack of a reply indicated he hadn't changed his position. I sighed. "I would share my combat log if someone would tell me how."
Focus on the section of log from 1 hour ago, then swipe it in our direction. Our interfaces will offer us the option to view it.
I selected the period from when the snake I'd almost stepped on lashed out to when both enemies fell. Master During nodded.
I see you've learned to summon elemental companions to your side. No small feat at level 8.
Drassen spoke in a low tone.
If the goddess didn't want her to have companions, she wouldn't have made the level requirement so low. We're talking about lesser summons, not the kind who can melt a boy to his dorm room floor.
My arms flinched. Melt him? Master During pushed a lock of white hair over one shoulder, though he never broke the squinting gaze set on me. Lyra uncrossed her legs. "You seem surprised? But how do I know your reaction is genuine?"
I detect no lies,
During said. "No skill is perfect." During broke his focus, then threw the Magister a look.
Indeed, Magister. but you will recall my occupation prior to joining your academy. I assure you, I am qualified to see a lie from a girl of this level."
Lyra smiled, and it irritated me. I considered the ranks I'd gained in my primary attributes, then thought about the discovery of the investigation skills. If they knew I'd ranked up without leveling, they'd easily infer I'd withheld materials from the Worsager study. In turn, Magister Lyra would have another reason not to trust me. Just to pile on to that towering lot of cow patties, they'd also insist I tell them where the remaining scrolls were. That would not do. There is nothing else. Master During pulled his elbows from his knees and thrust an accusing finger.
"She lies."
A curse word shot through my mind. Baba wouldn't have been proud. Magister Lyra nodded as if she'd expected this. About what, I wonder? Her eyes flicked left to right. Perhaps the missing time after her little altercation outside the wall? Plenty of time to return to the boy's room, murder him, then flee. My jaw related my protest when I ground my teeth back. I murdered no one. Magister Lyra leaned forward in her chair. Tell me, Tess, do you know who Johin is? You mean who he was? The Magister shot back, her mouth dropping open and her jaw tightening into a perfect square. Party, Drassen Welling.
Not your finest answer. You must remain calm. She is not to be trifled with.
But my blood boiled, and its heat rushed to my face. Party, Contessa of Milbury. Nor am I going to be trifled with. Master During interjected.
"You speak loosely for one who is innocent. Tell me, did you know Johin?"
Lyra answered in my stead. He locked her in the Dark One's study in what the students are calling the Below. She flashed a knowing smile when my own jaw dropped. Oh, you didn't think we knew about that. My first thought was of Shabana, but then I recalled how Elrin Zen had been waiting outside the chapel when I returned to town just minutes earlier, ready to strike. Knowing it had been him, a moment of guilt washed over me when I pictured how Shabana's face might frown if she'd been able to know what just happened in my mind. During raised his hands, palms up.
"Why doesn't she answer?"
I nodded. Yes, I knew Johin. He harassed us from the moment we came to the academy, and he was a bastard all the while after. The Magister hummed. A motive. I shot up from my chair. Fuck you, Lyra. The Magister's eyes bulged out of her head. You've admitted you've had it out for me from when I first entered your office, and I won't sit here and be accused by a woman too cowardly to accept a job instead of acting as a placeholder. You should be ashamed. Drassen Welling threw up one hand. It glowed lilac and black. You have been silenced by Drassen Welling. My ensuing glare burned into my bound companion. No, your bound master. Lyra stepped forward, closing to within a foot. At least Drassen has the sense to protect you from yourself before you make the kind of mistake that would force my hand. Red light flashed from the Magister's eyes, then dissipated. You do not want to toy with me further, child. She formed claws with her hands. They flashed a bright light, then my backside slammed into the chair. She leaned over me. Drassen pushed away from the shelves.
Tess, did you murder Johin?
No, I bellowed. Master Renard rose.
"Stop, Magister."
Lyra swung around, and although I couldn't see her gaze from my angle, her posture left me with the impression it wasn't friendly. He showed her his open palm.
"Forgive me, Lyra, but about this, she isn't lying."
What? Lyra turned her head toward me, then back at the elf.
When he asked her, she answered immediately, and I saw no lie in her eyes despite her anger. She did not kill that boy.
Magister Lyra shoved a finger toward his chair. I will be the judge of that. Sit. Master Renard shook his head.
"I represent Queen Semantia here. It was agreed I do not report to you except as it applies to matters involving the curriculum, and I will not see you wrongly accuse an innocent. If you have qualms, take them up with the Queen."
You are suspended from duty.
Return to your precious queen.
Drawson stepped closer to the duo.
Lyra, be calm. The queen has been nothing but supportive and generous in our efforts here.
But not as generous as the patron whose son was killed here this day.
And there it was, the truth. The High Chancellor was a key contributor to the Academy, and his son was dead. It didn't take a genius to decipher Lyra's motivations. In a way, I couldn't blame her. Although I'd accused her of being a coward for not accepting the magistership outright, her fear that the High Chancellor might withdraw funding for the school showed fierce dedication to the job. Fine, she gestured toward the door, but your services for this interrogation are no longer required. Master Renard yanked his robe as if clearing wrinkles.
The Queen will hear of this insult, Magister.
He stomped from the room before she could reply. I was impressed when he closed the door softly behind him because I'd have made every effort to tear it from its hinges. Maybe I need to do something about my temper. Magister Lyra wheeled on me again. Elrin Zen received a message from the dying boy as he lay burning. Would you like to know what it said? She cocked her chin, then a window popped open in my interface. Party, Johanter.
Contessa of Milbury, you must...
I stared in disbelief. Why had he used his last words on me? What had he been trying to say? Drawson stepped forward.
It proves nothing. I know where Tess was, and she wasn't within a stone's throw of the Academy at the time of his death.
Lyra shook her head. Then provide her whereabouts. With all eyes on my master, I sent him a pleading expression. Party, Contessa of Milbury. Please no. You must trust me. I have a friend there, and I must advance if I'm to stand against Wyzen the Cruel. Drawson shook his head, and his reply came aloud.
I'm sorry, Tess, but you're too important to me.
He cleared his throat. Tears welled in my eyes as I imagined the Templars and elves discovering Brunk and what they would do at the sight of him. Then the door slammed open, and a tall, broad-shouldered man in flowing purple robes with a thick golden chain hanging around his neck winked his eyes in succession. He pointed a long finger in my direction.
There! She's the one! Take her into custody at once!
4 towering guards entered the room. Drawson zipped forward in a blur I wouldn't have imagined him capable of. He raised both hands.
Stop! What is the meaning of this, High Chancellor?
This is the girl who murdered my son. She will be tried in Trowsby for her crime when my son was a citizen. This is the law.
To my surprise, it was Lyra who answered. With all due respect, High Chancellor, the crime was committed on Academy grounds. My interrogator found no lie when she answered to your son's killing. By law, she must stand before the Academy's council.
And where is this interrogator?
The Chancellor looked around. He left. Chancellor Tur blew a short laugh.
Ha! A likely story.
Then his face melted into a stony expression.
If you desire the Council of Elders further patronage, you will stand aside, Magister. I don't think your other contributors can keep your budget in the surplus.
Lyra lowered her hand, and I sensed her feeling of defeat. The High Chancellor turned on Drawson.
Move, or we will have you removed.
It will be the final mistake of your life, Chancellor.
Tur took a short step backward as his soldiers reached for their weapons. A woman with fiery red hair to her shoulders stepped into the room and reached for a twisted, ornately runed staff on her back. The Chancellor smiled.
If this comes to conflict, I assure you it will be your last day at this academy.
Lyra choked a low answer. Drawson, you must submit.
The hell I will.
He turned, grabbed my shoulders, then a magic shield cast in a purple glow surrounded us. A new casting bar appeared over his head. Drawson, you mustn't, I said. You will lose everything.
And if I don't, I will lose the only thing that matters.
Light drained out of the world as a loud hum filled my ears, causing them to vibrate. Then we stood in daylight. The exercise field stood 50 yards away. The temple on the opposite side could be reached in 40 long paces. I glanced up at the dormitory entrance and realized this was the exact spot where he'd materialized from a portal when I attacked the demons. He must have been bound here.
Come, we must hurry.
He grabbed my arm, but I resisted his pull. But why would you do this? Why risk everything?
Must I repeat myself? Because you are everything, Tess. You must trust me. Now come.
A sudden wave of exhaustion overcame me. The idea this man would give up everything to aid me made little sense. Perhaps he was the kindest person in Warrington, but if I'd learned anything since joining the world outside my little farm, it was that people had their own motivations. No. Why are you helping me? It can't just be because of my potential. A clattering came to us on the wind from the Academy's main entrance when the towering figures who'd arrived with the High Chancellor flooded into the open. One raised his sword and pointed our direction.
Tess, you must come.
Tell me! He clutched my shoulders.
Stubborn child!
His eyes glistened with a clarity I hadn't seen in them before.
You are my brother's daughter, and I swore to protect you should he fall. Now come!